Over the past decade or so, the history community has been redefining how we speak about slavery. Referring to someone as a slave has been set aside, and the new term is enslaved. So we speak to the condition of the person instead of identifying the person as something lesser. Slave owner has become enslaver, which puts the onus on the person holding someone in bondage and the dignity and respect back to the person who is enslaved. Runaway slave becomes freedom seeker. Freedom seeker becomes self-liberator. And it was the idea of liberation, which was always at the core. Now we have the words to describe the meaning that was always there. That reveals a completely different person than what was previously depicted in our history, and I think reveals a person that looks more like us today. In the past quarter century, we've learned more about the Underground Railroad, partly through the advent of the internet, collections being digitized and made public, discovering new aspects about the Underground Railroad that really required us to bust some myths that we had about the system. One of those myths was that there were no records kept. Now we know that people on the Underground Railroad were actually keeping records, sometimes ledgers with names and dates of the people who came through their stations. We've been able to use that information, trace down those historical figures to people, descendants in the present, and kind of tie together the two ends of the story, one past, one present. As a result of these new research channels, we're getting a different picture. It's no longer nameless people who are escaping like that to freedom. It goes beyond the North Star and its guiding light. What we're discovering is who these people were. We're discovering what their experience in bondage was, what prompted them to make the dangerous journey, and then what they did once they achieved that freedom. The goal wasn't really to reach a place of freedom. The goal was really to claim one's own humanity, to steer one's own course, to determine for oneself what one's destiny was going to be. These were real achievers. These were people who abhorred the conditions that they were held under and formed in their mind an image of who and what they could be, and then put one foot in front of the other to reach that place. People who were enslaved were incredibly resilient. These were people who worked for their enslavers, created a world, culture, comfort for others, while holding together their own families and creating their own communities, even within the harrowing experience of bondage. Those who stepped forth and were able to venture out on the Underground Railroad showed an amazing amount of determination. So they were constantly negotiating not only the landscape that they were traveling on, but the interpersonal situations that they found themselves in. And then once in freedom, freedom was just not enough. Many of the people who we think of as the abolitionists were themselves former enslaved people. So they took their freedom and they used it to help others, not only get other people out of bondage, but once in a place of freedom, to build a new type of society.